Hey guys, how's it going? What is one of the most destructive units in Age of Empires 2? The Siege Onager is a very powerful unit that can take out lots of enemy or friendly units because it is a projectile weapon that has a large area of effect damage. In this video, I want to see what civilizations have the best Siege Onagers, and I'm going to do this by seeing what technologies and what unique bonuses affect the Siege Onager line. I'm also going to briefly rank all the other civilizations' Onager and Mangonel line, so that way you can tell with which civilizations you should make this unit. Now, before I begin, I would like to point out that my list might be a little bit different than another person's list, mainly because I am a deathmatch player, meaning I am only looking at the post-imperial Siege Onagers. And also, I'm going to be looking at this from the lens of the HD expansions, so that way if a civilization has had their Siege Onager nerfed by the new expansions, this will be reflected in this video. Also, for this video, I'm not really comparing how different civilizations' Siege Onagers do when faced against each other. Instead, I'm looking at how effective they are at doing their job, which is to act as a supporting unit against infantry, archers, and even at times cavalry and siege when you use it appropriately. And that is what's going to influence my ranking. And so to start, in the 9th and last place, there is the Turks and the Huns. This is because they only have access to Castle Age Mangonels, meaning that if you are in the post-imperial age, you really should never make these units. In 8th place would be all civilizations that have the Onager but lack siege engineers. And these civilizations would be the Byzantines, the Chinese, the Goths, Italians, Mayans, Persians, and Spanish. Now, if this is a little bit confusing, let me quickly explain what both the Onager and Siege Engineers are. First, Onager is the upgrade that comes before the Siege Onager upgrade. Siege Onager gives the Onager more attack, more health, and it also means that the blast radius of the projectile will be larger. This is not to be confused with the Siege Engineers upgrade, which is a university upgrade that lets siege weapons have a higher attack versus buildings and gives Onagers and bombard cannons and I believe trebuchets 1 extra range. Siege Engineers is very important, especially for the Onager, because of how slow a unit the Onager is. Now, I have previously said that you can still use Onagers even if you don't have Siege Engineers, and this is true, but it really should not be a go-to unit, and you should only make it in very rare situations. The next ranking would be the 7th place, which would be Onagers that do have Siege Engineers, which would include the Berbers, the Britons, the Burmese, the Franks, the Incas, Indians, Japanese, and the Khmer, as well as the Magyars, Malay, Portuguese, Vietnamese, and the Vikings. While these Onagers, when compared to a Siege Onager, are fragile and they do lack some of that very important damage, they do have enough range that would necessitate their use in many situations. Also included in 7th place would be the Malians, because they're the only civilization that has the Siege Onager upgrade without the Siege Engineers upgrade. This basically means that they lack the range of the other 7th place civilizations, but they have more health and more attack. In 6th place would be all the civilizations that have Siege Onagers and Siege Engineers, but without having any bonuses, which would be the Aztecs and the Saracens. Even though the Aztecs and the Saracens lack major bonuses that affect these units, I still think that in just about every situation I would make their Siege Onagers because of how much damage potential those units have. And now, for my top 5 Siege Onager civilizations. In 5th place would be a tie between the Slavs and the Teutons. The Slavs' Siege Onagers and all their other Siege Workshop weapons are 15% cheaper, meaning you can field 15% more of these units for the same cost. And this is a really great bonus that really pushes you towards making Siege Onagers. The Teutons in the HD expansions have a unique tech called Ironclad, which gives all their siege weapons +4 melee armor. And what this means that their Siege Onagers are a little bit more resistant to units such as Hussars and Paladins, which means that at times this will save you an Onager every now and then. In 4th place would be the Koreans, who have a unique technology Shinkunshin, which gives their Onagers +1 range, meaning they outrange all other Siege Onagers, and it also means that they can engage their enemies before any of the other civilizations, with the exception of maybe one which we'll talk about later. The Koreans also have a team bonus, which takes away one of the minimum range of the Onagers, which can help, but it can also hurt at times. I'd like to point out that in Age of Conquerors, their team bonus was a +1 range, which was also the same thing as Shinkunshin, which would have made the Koreans much higher on this list. However, I'm looking at this from the point of view of the HD expansions, where their Siege Onagers were nerfed. In 3rd place is the Celts. They have a unique technology, Furor Celtica, which gives their siege weapons +40% HP. Meaning that the Siege Onagers will be a lot harder to be taken down by enemy units. They also fire 25% faster and are created 20% faster, meaning that it's going to be really easy to field these units and they are going to be very effective. However, they are outdone by the number 2 and the number 1 civilizations in my opinion. In 2nd place is the Ethiopians. Now, keep in mind, the Ethiopians already have a pretty awesome Siege Workshop, being the only civilization to have all 4 siege weapons to be fully upgraded. However, they also have an amazing unique technology, torsion engines, which increases their blast radius by about 1 tile. And this means that when facing enemy archers and enemy infantry, the Ethiopian Siege Onagers will absolutely devastate these armies in only 2 or 3 shots, because you're going to be killing a large amount of units. This also means that it's a lot harder to micro against these Siege Onagers, because if they miss, it's not quite as big a deal. However, as we shall see, the number 1 spot of the Siege Onagers must go to the Mongols. And this is because their unique technology drill allows their siege weapons to move 50% faster. Now, at first this might not seem like that big of a deal, but trust me, it really is. Now, I'm not going to talk about how much this technology helps their rams and scorpions, and hint, it really helps their rams a whole lot. But I'll save that for another video. Instead, I'm going to talk about how this helps their Siege Onagers, and I gotta tell you, it helps them in a myriad of ways. You don't believe me? Let me break it down to you. For starters, their Siege Onagers can actually get to the battle in a timely manner. And what I mean by this is that if you don't build your siege workshops forward, you can still use the Siege Onagers in the battle because they can actually get to there at about the same speed as infantry units would. With most civilizations, I feel like I am forced to build forward siege workshops, and I don't like doing this all the time because it's a big investment of villagers and of time, and sometimes I just need those siege weapons at the battle now, and with the Mongol bonus, that really helps this situation. However, the Mongol bonus greatly affects the Siege Onagers when they're in that battle. So for example, if you're trying to micro against other units, and the speed means that they'll get to that destination way faster, and that they'll avoid enemy attacks way sooner than another civilizations would. But I think that the biggest reason I like this bonus so much is that it means you can actually, to an extent, hit and run with Siege Onagers. Now, if you don't know what hit and running is, it's basically where you attack units that are chasing your own units while your units retreat. If you use attack ground, which by the way is where you don't attack a unit, but instead attack a certain tile in the game map, you can actually use the Mongol Siege Onagers to devastating effect. Archer units that used to be able to run away from Siege Onagers can't really do so anymore because your Siege Onager is almost as fast as archers. Infantry units that used to be able to kind of micro around it, but that were still countered somewhat by it, now can get hit and run super easily because your Onager is just about the same speed as them. It's really crazy. And finally, even cavalry are somewhat weak to the Siege Onagers if the other player isn't paying attention, and especially if they don't have husbandry. Now these do seem like a lot of wild claims, but if you don't believe me, just watch this video that proves my point in every way. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that paladins and hussars, and to an extent camels, cease to counter Siege Onagers, because they don't cease to counter them. They still do a relatively good job. However, this unique technology allows the Mongol Siege Onagers to not be quite as weak as a generic civilization Siege Onagers. And it means that if you have the time to pay attention, you can really avert a lot of the damage that can be done, which will allow you to win engagements, which will allow you to continue to win the game. And I think that this is part of the reason why I love the Mongol Siege Onagers so much. They are fast and agile, and they do very well at their job because they're a lot easier to use. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I'd like to point out that there are many people who are way better at this game than I am who would disagree with me and who would say that the Celtic Siege Onagers or the Ethiopian ones are better than the Mongol ones, because they do so much more damage against units. However, I think that because of maybe my skill level or because of my playstyle, the ability to micro the Mongol Siege Onagers greatly increases their effectiveness, their usefulness, and their survivability. Which is why, because this is a personal top 5 list, I think I'm completely and totally justified for putting them here in this spot. You may disagree with me, and I'd really love to hear why. That's basically my list of the top 5 Siege Onager civilizations. I thank you for watching, and I really hope that you have found this to be useful, and maybe in a game, if you're one of those civilizations, you'll really use this unit to its fullest potential. See ya on the battlefield, and have fun.